Inner Violent Nature is a new horror film that has been grabbing a lot of attention, but honestly, it's not the attention I expected. The hype for this prior to release was huge. So many were anticipating its release because of its unique premise, which if you didn't know, it's a generic slasher but shot from the killer's perspective. And then it released, and the reactions have been ambivalent, which surprises me because though I don't think this is anything necessarily spectacular, does it deliver on the premise that made people see it in the first place? Absolutely. Does it play around with the concept in any interesting ways? I think so, and not only does it deliver on what was promised, it also has some phenomenal standout moments aside from the gimmick. When I was reading the reviews, I saw a lot of comparisons to Friday the 13th, and whilst that's obviously one of the major influences of the film, it isn't the only influence, and to the people saying this is a lesser Friday the 13th, clearly you have not seen it because that movie reeks. But beyond the whole bulky white zombie guy who was a bullied kid thing, which isn't masterfully unique to Jason Voorhees anyway, there's not a lot you can say was direct inspiration because the film is so busy doing so many homages to other classic slashers and horrors beyond, like Halloween, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We even get a fair bit of Blair Witch Project near the end. This film has a clear passion and adoration for horror, and though this film is built on a gimmick, they use that gimmick as a vessel to be as cliche and accessible and familiar as possible to remind you why this film is unique. Because it isn't at all, it's just a POV switch on what we already love. The opening shot is this almost stagnant look at this decrepit cabin in the woods that lingers whilst we hear what would usually be the protagonist talk in the background. This is important because, as I always say, the most important shot in a film is the opening one. The first sequence you present is there to sell the film and to set it up. And though yes, this movie's premise is what gained it traction in the first place, some may not know of the premise, and therefore the film shouldn't rely on the audience's pre-existing knowledge of said premise. It should be able to communicate it to you in the film itself, and that's exactly what this is. This opening sequence does so well to inform the audience that the people talking do not matter. They are not the focus. The focus here is on the woods, the burnt cabin, and this necklace, which are all staples of the narrative. We eventually see the killer rise from the ground and the film gets going. We follow him walking around the woods and whatnot, and this is where I should say that this moment, this little sequence, is where a lot of people falter. Because I've heard this film is boring, I've heard this film is slow, and though I can understand those critiques and understand where they're coming from, this is what the film is trying to be. It's a slow burner with a few moments of excitement every now and then. It's showing us that most horrors are only exciting because we follow the mouse, right? And people constantly make jokes about how slow killers walk in slashers, especially old ones, but this demonstrates how easily that becomes overwhelming because it's done with so much conviction and pertinacity. He doesn't rest, he doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, he just walks and kills, and that's his advantage. There's a kill in the beginning which is very tame. We barely see anything happen at all, but we do get this absolutely unreal hand transition shot, which I think is honestly more harrowing than anything they could have shown us. And these moments are like a reward for sticking with these long sequences where a lot of people will tap out. Then we get some backstory, we get this fun circling shot of the group of friends around a campfire that exposit information for the audience on our killer, but the whole thing is very absorbing and lets us take a break for a moment. And I also think the purpose of this moment, and a lot of moments like it, are to reflect on us how blissfully unaware we are a lot of the time. You watching this video, when was the last time you looked behind you, or in the corner of your room when you're gaming, or if you're walking right now, when was the last time you checked your surroundings, took note of behind you? It's a lot easier for us to be stalked than we actually think, and what drives this home more are the numerous scenes of our killer just being curious. He doesn't crave blood and goes bonkers at the first sight of people, he studies his prey almost. And then when he does kill, for one, the effects and practicality of it is astounding, especially the yoga kill, which I definitely cannot show on here, but it is one of the best kills I've seen in horror in a very long time. And two, his kills feel so mundane to him. I mean, the film doesn't make any of the gore or violence dramatic. There's not much intense music or framing, everything is very still, real even, like a nature documentary, just unbiased, objective, predator and prey. Murder is so intrinsic to him, he doesn't even react or relish in it. He really does just have a violent nature. It's as if it's part of his biology, as necessary to his routine as breathing. And he's constantly experimenting with how he kills. He never does the same thing twice, which goes towards another point. There's a moment in this movie where he picks up a car keyring and starts playing with it as if he were a kid, and then he also has this little costume that he steals, and it's all telling us how he's so obviously stunted in youth due to the tragedy, but more so how all of this is just kind of make-believe for him. The mask and the act, it's all just dress up. And for a film that mostly just follows a guy walking around the woods, it's paced exceptionally well. It sprints to the finish line, moving from set piece to set piece with such brevity that, though this is in some ways a slow burner like I said, it also doesn't feel like it's wasting my time ever, which I'm aware is a sentiment not shared with a lot of others. And it's just doing so much that I feel is being underappreciated. Like, the inclusion of the Ranger makes this feel in some ways like a sequel, akin to Dream Warriors but from Freddy's perspective. And I love the glimpses into the victims and their world. There are so many moments of an implied narrative from their perspective, as if there's a whole other movie happening alongside this one, which itself would be pretty cliche and boring. At least we get cliche and potentially boring, but with cool perspective twists, and we even get a final girl who wins in a peculiar way that earns her survival over the others. We have some beautiful cinematography, genuinely outstanding shots, and it uses its budget very well. It's shot in a confined location with a quaint cast and very few camera tricks to conserve enough money to funnel into great practical effects, which is what the heart of horror is. So is it exceptional? No. Will it be the best horror of the year? I don't think so, but is it an interesting experiment that's worth experiencing? Absolutely. Don't expect a bloodbath. Despite my mentions of very great gory kills here and there, expect a movie that is both challenging the conventions of horror whilst honouring them in a way that feels fresh and new. There's an enchanting final monologue in this film where this lady is telling a story about a man and a bear. The man explains in the story that there's this thing called henhouse syndrome. It's the existence of surplus killing, saying that animals don't get too hung up on reason, which is just such a concise encapsulation of our killer. There is no reason to why he is the way he is or why he does what he does. He just is and does. It's a very thought-provoking end and glimpse into the wickedness of some souls, expressing to us that there is such a thing as a violent nature, something so inherently evil in some people that they commit heinous acts without the mental blockade to even consider not doing it. So then we end on a couple still shots of the film's locations, and they do what I believe Skinamarink attempts to do, or does for a lot of people, just not for me. But in this, I really felt stalked. I felt uneasy looking at these shots, and with the perfect closing shot to boot, I think this film is very effective in what it wants to achieve. I just think a lot of people wanted something that wasn't the film's goal. But that's just me. What do you think? Have you seen it? If so, let me know what you think. If not, will you? And whether it's one shot from the killer's perspective or not. As always, keep watching movies.